Now let's discuss the Volume 16 of Sword Oratoria. While most of this may be the same content of Volume 21 in the main story, some of this content may not shown on main story. It already deep explanation, so we won't miss any important part. The Chapter 1 started with the roar of Raoul, battered and broken, echoed through the first floor of Babel. It was both a wail of despair announcing the Loki Familia's defeat and a desperate plea for the rescue of the first-class adventurers still trapped below. As those words spread like wildfire, the world itself reeled in shock. The adventurers, guild staff, and townsfolk who had gathered around Babel are all frozen in disbelief and had their paralysis shattered in an instant. And standing at the front of that storm of condemnation, the only one still shouting aside from his goddess was Raoul, and they are begging to save Finn and the others on the 60th floor. Covered in blood, Alicia, Cruz, and Narvi clutched their wounds and bit their lips, while Elfe and the others who couldn't even stand collapsed to the floor. All of them was in despair. But for Lapia, none of that mattered. While she's looking to Bell as her only last hope, a ticket to a rematch to the 60th floor, he was the source of the flame that would never allow Lapia to remain a miserable and defeated failure. That's why Lafia, unlike the other members, was able to stand up swiftly even from the depths of hopelessness. Lapia had swiftly pulled herself from despair, charged straight into the crowd, trying to reach Bell, but her leg suddenly gave out, bending awkwardly at the knee. It was simply her body's limit. In a clinic, Elfe, who had given up her own bed to a colleague who had lost a leg, was on the verge of collapsing into tears. She'd tell that it had all happened so fast, everything had ended in the blink of an eye. After Ice and the others had departed from the base until the dungeon began to rumble from far below. Then, as if triggered by that tremor, a flood of monsters swarmed to their base. Unable to hold the line, Elfie and the others regrouped with Raoul and Lapaya, who had returned from the front line, and together they escaped from the deep floors. But along the way, they lost so much and many had died. Also, there's a level 4 survivor, yet now she covered her eyes with her bandaged arm and unable to stop her tears. Some of them blaming Loki Familia for the loss of their comrade. This latest attack on the 60th floor, though it should have been a duty shared among all factions, including the Freya Familia. It was a battle that should never have ended in annihilation. A battle they were not supposed to lose. Even if the mission had been a guild-enforced one, the Loki Familia who led the faction alliance carried that burden. And yet those who knew of the defeat of Zeus and Hera Familia to One-Eyed Black Dragon understood that in Orario there is no such thing as absolute in adventure. Raoul was blaming himself as a coward and continuously telling sorry to Loki. He confessed his sins before his god, unable to stop the flow of tears. Raoul tells that he left their captain deep inside the dungeon. Loki's lips trembled as she pressed them together. Then she drew him into her arms and hugged him. She didn't care that his tears and snot soaked her shoulders and chest, placing a hand on the back of his head. She pulled him close, holding him tightly. She had never given such an embrace, not even to Finn. And this scene was one Loki had known might someday come. She had never wanted this day to arrive. She had never even wanted to imagine it. But if the day came when Finn and the others were gone, there was no one else who could shoulder their place but Raoul. In the southwest of Orario, Lapia was standing before Baldur, the god of light, and her mentor Leon. Lapia was pleading for help. Please, help my familia, help Ice and the others. Baldur said that she didn't need to ask because the Academy will provide Orario with its full cooperation. In fact, they've already begun. The teachers and several others have already entered the dungeon to make preparations. Baldur promised that every remaining unit would be given to the Loki Familia, and Lapia could only bow her head in gratitude, as Leon said to Lapaya that he prepared the details and the school district is willing to teach her all the trump card spell, because she was the only one who could use summoning magic, and Leon stated that Lapia is the only one who can still grow stronger in the little time they have left before the rescue mission. The massive army of the Ganesha Familia, led by first-class adventurer Shakti, was the first to march into the dungeon. The Freya Familia, of course, deployed as well. Every warrior except the first-class adventurers marched into battle. The hostess of fertility, including Mamma Mia, were dragged into the effort as well. Their mission is to clear the pathway so the main force for rescue missions speed up the journey to the 60th floor. This unprecedented speed was all thanks to Loki and her group who had been watching the battle on the 60th floor through the Oculus crystal. The moment communication with Finn's team was lost, and Raoul's group began their desperate retreat, Loki and the others had rushed to deliver all information to Heden. Heden immediately drafted the rescue plan and issued orders for a rapid mobilization, commanding the Ganesha Familia and other forces to prepare for combat and launch a dungeon assault without delay. In short, by the time Lapia and her group were struggling to escape the dungeon 5 days earlier, nearly every major adventurer in Orario, excluding civilians and lower-ranked fighters, was already in motion for the Loki Familia rescue mission. To come up with a plan like this in an instant and then actually pull it off, what kind of brain and guts does he even have? Heden's leadership was beyond exceptional. Even the girl Palom could only describe it as demonic. Not in malice, but in how perfectly, ruthlessly efficient he was at dragging everyone into his plans. All in all, Royman, who knew all along that rescuing Finn and the others were almost 0% chance. Royman began to tremble while telling it because he hid the information about Thalia's ice garden. He's blaming himself that if he hadn't proposed the shaft construction project, those damn school district wouldn't have revolted and the competition won't happen, and the faction alliance could have pulled in Freya Familia and Hestia Familia, and Finn and the others would still be alive. Royman carried scars and traumas burned deep because he had seen the mighty fall of those once unshakable heroes who believed they could never lose and the gods' greatest champions. He had witnessed the annihilation of the Zeus, and Hera Familia was crushed by the Black Dragon, and that day Royman had learned what true failure meant. In the guild's underground altar, Freya entered the Hall of Prayer, and she was dressed not in the robes of a queen, but in a pale green uniform, as if she'd just come from her shift at the tavern. Many gods were gathered in the underground sanctuary, and Uranus proof of how grave the situation had become. The reason why Freya took the initiative is because she was very angry and telling, "They took my precious children from me, and I will make them pay for it," which means some members of Freya Familia had already died. For that purpose, she would lend her strength, whatever it took. Without a word, Raoul accepted the status sheet Loki handed him and lowered his gaze. Raoul has now reached level 5, but there was no joy and no excitement. A faint and self-deprecating smile crossed Raoul's face. To him, this number 5 wasn't a badge of honor, it was a one-way ticket to the 60th floor. He left the status sheet on the desk and picked up his weapons. Loki reached out a trembling hand. She doesn't want Raoul to go back to the 60th floor, but she stopped halfway. Something in her told her not to move, that this moment was final, and her lips pressed tightly together as she watched him go. The back that vanished through the doorway looked like that of a traveler bound for a farewell that would never see return. 3 hours until the dungeon departure time. Lapia goes to where Belle is. Belle is sleeping, and as Lapia looking at Belle's face, she unconsciously leaned closer to him. She held her breath, stilled her presence, and placed a hand on the bed as if to cover him and continued watching. She tells him that I need your strength. The answer was already decided from the moment she came back to the surface, and in the flash of anger and scorching heat, she found Belle as the source of hope. It was inevitable that the two of them would head toward that longing. Like a jester's merry tune leading her along, Lapia had promised herself she would take his hand. So now she had to watch over him like an older sister. Sorry for dragging him into this, and sorry for abandoning the object of our admiration. The apology she needed to say stayed hidden deep in her chest, and there were so many things she would have to tell him once those eyes opened. So for now, she kept staring at his face. The moment Belle awoke, Lapia told him everything he needed to know. Entrusted by Leon and volunteering herself to act as messenger to Belle, Lapia spoke in a voice stripped of emotion, though inside it felt as though a rasp were grinding against her heart. Belle was silent through most of it, his expression changing from shock to disbelief to wordless numbness. And then Lapia kneeled before him, and she said softly, "Please lend us your strength." She set aside elven pride, carved repentance into her heart, and bowed her head. And just as she expected, Belle's red eyes flared with light and said, "I will, but you have to lend me yours too." He took the card and nodded with conviction. Let's save Ice and the others together. Their departure, however, was not so harmonious.